The red emergency lights painted everything in blood across the bridge of the warship Eternal Vigilance. Admiral Thex stood at his command station and stared at the main screen. Floating in the wreckage of what used to be a busy trading post was a single human escape pod. Just one pod. One human. That was all it took to make his 3 hearts beat faster with fear. "Orders, sir?" his second officer asked. The officer's tentacles were wrapped tight around his station. Everyone on the bridge was tense. "Destroy it," Thex said. His voice was calm but firm. "Before it can send any messages." The weapons officer looked up from his controls. His claws paused over the firing button. "Sir, our scans show only one person inside." "No weapons. The pod is damaged and losing air. I gave you an order." Nobody spoke. They all knew the rules. They all understood why humanity had been marked as the biggest threat to every civilization in the galaxy. Not because of their guns or bombs, not because of their spaceships, which were not as good as Council technology, but because of something much more dangerous. Thex watched the weapon charge up. He had seen 3 entire alien civilizations fall apart. Whole species turned against each other in civil wars, all because they had listened to human words. "Ready to fire," the weapons officer said. "Wait." The communications officer sat up straight at her station. "Admiral, the pod is sending a signal." "Audio only. Cut it off now. I cannot, sir." "It is broadcasting on every frequency. Our systems are picking it up automatically." A crackling sound filled the bridge. Then came heavy breathing. Then a voice spoke in broken galactic common language. "My name is Day. I am alone. My station is gone. My family is dead. I do not ask you to save me. I only ask that someone remembers we existed, that we tried to build something peaceful, that we believed." The voice stopped to take a painful breath, "that we believed aliens and humans could live together in peace." "Fire the weapon," Thex commanded, but the weapons officer sat frozen. He stared at his screen. Around the bridge, every crew member had stopped moving. The human words had already done their damage. "Fire the weapon now," Thex shouted. The plasma beam shot through space and destroyed the escape pod instantly, but it was too late. Thex could see it in the faces of his crew. The doubt had started. The questions had begun. The most dangerous weapon humans had was already working. Thex had served the Council for 17 years. He had never disobeyed an order. He had never questioned his commanders. But as he looked at the empty space where the pod had been, he felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt uncertain. "Sir," his second officer said quietly. Was that necessary? He only wanted to be remembered. There it was. The infection spreading through his crew. Thex activated the security system and marked everyone on the bridge for mental evaluation and possible mind cleaning. This was standard after any contact with humans. What he wanted, Thex said in a hard voice, was for us to think, to question, to doubt. That is what makes humans so dangerous. He opened the secret council files about humanity. The reports made him cold inside even though he had read them before. Species after species had been broken, not by human weapons but by human ideas. Ideas like individual rights and freedom of choice and questioning authority. Words like hope and dignity and thinking for yourself. First contact had seemed harmless. Humanity was young and had just learned to travel faster than light. The Delthani Empire had welcomed them with open arms. They were excited to add human ideas to galactic culture. 10 years later, the Delthani Empire broke into pieces. Not from war or invasion, but from inside. Workers started questioning their jobs. Citizens demanded a voice in government. Artists made things that challenged the old ways. All because they had talked with humans. All because they had heard dangerous words about freedom and personal worth. The Council had tried to stop it. Humanity was locked in their home system. Trade was forbidden. Communication was blocked. But humans kept finding ways to get their messages out. Radio signals. Hidden data. Even paper letters smuggled on cargo ships. Everywhere human words reached, order fell apart. Stability crumbled. The careful systems that had kept galactic peace for thousands of years began to shake. So the Council made a hard choice. Humanity was declared a threat to existence itself. Any human found outside their prison zone had to be killed immediately. No exceptions, no trials. The risk was too great. Thex looked at his bridge crew being taken away by security. They would be fine after treatment. Memory erasure, emotion adjustment, thinking correction. Standard procedure, it worked. It was necessary. But as he watched them leave, Thex wondered about the human in the pod. D. What made someone keep talking even when death was coming? What kind of people valued their last words more than their own lives? He pushed the thoughts away. This was exactly how it started. Questions leading to more questions, doubts growing larger. Before long, you found yourself questioning everything you had ever known. Everything that kept society working. The council was right. Humans had to be contained, had to be killed when found, not because of cruelty but because of necessity. Some threats could not be fought with guns and bombs. Some dangers came wrapped in hope and kindness and calls to think for yourself. Thex wrote his report and marked the space sector as contaminated. He ordered the ship to the nearest council station for full crew evaluation. Another human eliminated, another disaster prevented. But that night in his quarters, Thex found himself thinking about what Day had said. About building something good. About believing in peace between species. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Thex began to wonder something dangerous. Was eliminating that belief really protection? Or was it something else? He tried to sleep, but the question would not leave his mind. One human had died today. One voice had been silenced. But the words remained, echoing in his thoughts like a virus he could not cure. And somewhere deep inside, Thex realized something terrifying. The humans had already won. Not through weapons or ships or armies. But through one simple act, they had made him question. And once you start questioning, you can never fully stop. Counselor Vra stood before the assembly of elders in the great chamber. Her body was made of living crystal that reflected light in 1,000 colors. Holographic screens floated in front of her showing the latest reports from the quarantine zone. "The situation is getting worse," she announced. Her voice echoed through the vast hall. 3 more human ships tried to break through the containment field. We destroyed all of them, but not before they sent their messages. Elder Morpheus was a being made of living stone. He had watched civilizations rise and fall for thousands of years. His deep voice rumbled through the chamber. "What did these messages say?" "The usual contamination," Vra replied. Her light grew dimmer with worry. "Stories about human history, tales of their struggles and victories, poetry, music, philosophy." She paused. One message was especially concerning. A human named Jiwan broadcast for almost 3 minutes before we destroyed her ship. She talked about forgiveness. A wave of alarm passed through the chamber. Forgiveness, one of the most dangerous human ideas. The concept that wrong actions could be acknowledged and moved past. That past crimes did not define future possibilities. That change and redemption were possible. "How many systems received the transmission?" Elder Morpheus asked. 47. "We have started standard protocols. Memory suppression for everyone who heard it. Mental reconditioning. Information quarantine. It will not be enough." The voice came from Elder Shak. His species had been among the first to meet humanity. It is never enough. The ideas spread like a disease. One person hears, tells another in secret, and before you know it, entire populations are questioning the natural order. Vra knew he was right. The Council had spent 30 years fighting an invisible war. Every human they killed seemed to create 10 more questions among those who learned about it. Every message they blocked somehow leaked out in pieces. Every attempt to contain only seemed to prove what humans always said. That information wanted to be free. That ideas could not be killed. "Perhaps," Elder Morpheus said slowly, "we have been doing this wrong. We treat human words as a threat to eliminate. But what if we counter them with our own story? Show the galaxy the chaos that human thinking brings?" "We tried that," Shak responded. "The historical records are clear. We show evidence of the destabilization, the collapsed empires, the civil unrest. And what happens? Citizens begin questioning whether stability through ignorance is worth keeping. They ask if order without choice is truly order at all. Then we must increase enforcement," another elder suggested. "Tighter control on information. Stricter penalties for exposure to human ideas. Complete isolation of affected populations." Vra had heard this argument many times. It was the same solution they had been using for decades. And yet the problem only grew worse. She thought of a report she had read yesterday. A mid-level administrator on an outer colony world had been caught writing what he called a protest poem. When questioned, he said he had never met a human. He had simply heard someone mention the idea of artistic expression as resistance, and that one idea had taken root in his mind. One idea, heard third hand. And it was enough to transform a loyal worker into what the Council called a subversive element. "There is another matter." Vera said. She changed the displays. A new image appeared showing a young human female. This is Hana. She was captured trying to reach Council space in a damaged scout ship. She is currently in our maximum security facility on Station Omega. Why was she not executed immediately? Shaq demanded. Because she claims to have information about a larger human operation, an organized attempt to break the quarantine. We believe she may have valuable intelligence. And you think you can question her without being contaminated? Morpheus asked. We have taken every precaution. She is held in complete isolation. All interactions are done through AI systems. No direct communication with living personnel. I want her eliminated, Shaq said. Today, now. The risk is too great. Wait. Morpheus held up a hand. If there truly is a larger operation, we need to know about it. Counselor Vera, you may continue your interrogation, but I want daily reports. At the first sign of contamination, kill the subject and everyone involved. Vera bowed to show she understood. Her light flickered with what might have been concern. Later in her private office, Vera read the transcripts from Hana's interrogation. The AI had asked standard questions. What is your mission? Who sent you? What is humanity planning? And Hana had answered each question with another question. Why do you fear us so much? What are you afraid we will say? If your system is truly superior, why does it need such extreme measures to protect it? The AI had reported the responses as non-compliant, but Vera read them differently. Each question was a small bomb designed to explode in the mind of whoever thought about it seriously. She should delete the transcripts. Mark them as hazardous material. Request memory suppression for herself as a safety measure. Instead, she read them again. What are you afraid we will say? Vera had been part of the council for over a century. She had helped write the quarantine protocols. She believed in the necessity of controlling human influence. And yet reading Hana's words, she could not think of a clear answer to that simple question. What exactly were they afraid humans would say? She opened the historical records. The fall of the Delthani Empire. The collapse of the Vrex hegemony. The breaking of the Korthani collective. In each case, human contact had come before massive social upheaval. But as she read the detailed reports, Vera began to notice something she had never paid attention to before. In every case, the societies that fell had been strictly hierarchical, built on rigid systems where everyone had a fixed place, maintained through information control and suppression of individual thought. And in every case, the human ideas that proved most dangerous were not calls to violence or revolution. They were simple concepts, that every individual had worth, that authority should be questioned, that there might be better ways to organize society. That change was possible. Avra closed the files and sat in the darkness of her office. Her crystalline form barely glowed. She had a decision to make. Report her own contamination and submit to memory suppression, or continue down this path and see where it led. For the first time in her long life, Counselor Vera chose to think for herself. And in making that choice, she became exactly what the Council feared most. Proof that human ideas could not be contained by walls or weapons or laws. In her cell on Station Omega, Hana smiled. She had not told them anything about a larger operation because there was no operation, not in the way they imagined. The operation was simply this: to make people think, to plant questions, to show through simple existence that the Council's fear was itself the prison. One conversation at a time. One question at a time. One mind at a time. That was how you defeated an empire built on enforced certainty, not with weapons but with the simple, terrifying power of doubt. Security Officer Krell had worked at Station Omega for 12 years without any problems. He was proud of following the rules exactly. Every prisoner was a potential threat. Every interaction was logged. Every violation of standard procedure was reported immediately. So when he discovered that Counselor Vera had been visiting the human prisoner's cell without supervision, his duty was clear. He filed a formal report with the Council's Internal Security Division. 3 hours later, Vera's office was sealed and her access was revoked. Krell received praise for his vigilance and a promotion to Senior Security Officer. The system had worked exactly as designed, yet as he watched Vera being escorted to the reconditioning facility, Krell felt something strange. The humans had a word for it, one he had learned during his security training on recognizing contamination symptoms: guilt. He pushed the feeling aside and returned to his duties. At the end of his shift, He did his routine inspection of the detention level. Standard procedure required visual confirmation of all high-risk prisoners every 6 hours. When he reached Hana's cell, he found her sitting cross-legged on the floor with her eyes closed, breathing slowly. The file called it meditation. A human mental discipline. Prisoner, Krell said through the communication panel. Stand for inspection. Hana opened her eyes and smiled at him. You are the one who reported the counselor. It was not a question. Krell felt his scales prickle with unease. How did you know? Because that is what the system trains you to do. To report deviation. To maintain order. To never question why. She stood slowly with calm, deliberate movements. What was her crime, officer? Speaking with me. Asking questions. She violated protocol, Krell said stiffly. Unsupervised contact with a quarantine subject is forbidden. And you never wondered why? Why an advanced civilization would be so terrified of conversation? I do not need to wonder. I follow my orders. Yes, Hana said softly. That is what every guard in every prison in every tyrannical system has always said. I was just following orders. Krell felt his anger rise. You compare the Galactic Council to tyranny? We have maintained peace for thousands of years. We have prevented countless wars. We have created stability across 100 worlds, and have you? Hana moved closer to the energy barrier that separated them. Or have you created the appearance of peace through fear and suppression? Is it truly peace when people are afraid to think? When ideas are treated as weapons, when asking questions can get you erased? Enough, Krell snapped. You are attempting contamination. I am logging this interaction and requesting immediate memory suppression for myself. Before you do, Hana said, answer me one question. Not for me. For yourself. When you reported the counselor, did you feel proud, or did you feel guilty? Krell stood frozen. The question hung in the air between them like a living thing. He should walk away. He should activate emergency protocols. He should request backup and psychological intervention. Instead, he heard himself say, both. Why guilty? Hana asked gently. Because she was kind, Krell found himself confessing. In my 12 years here, I have watched hundreds of prisoners processed. Most guards treat them as objects, as threats. But Vra treated you as a person. She brought you books from her personal collection. She made sure your environmental settings were comfortable. She spoke to you with respect. And you reported her for that kindness. I reported her for breaking protocol, Krell insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Tell me about your family, officer. Do you have one? The change in subject surprised him. I have a bonded mate. 2 offspring, why? Do you ever question your orders? Do you ever think about what kind of galaxy you are creating for them? I create a safe galaxy. One where order prevails, where everyone knows their place and performs their function. And if one of your children asked why, if they questioned their assigned role, if they wanted to choose their own path, what then? Krell felt something crack inside him. He thought of his youngest who loved creating art instead of studying tactical operations, who asked endless questions about why things were the way they were, who the instructors had flagged as showing signs of non-conformist thinking. They would receive proper guidance, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to himself. Proper guidance, Hana repeated, like the reconditioning Vra is receiving right now. Like the memory suppression, the psychological adjustments, the erasure of everything that makes someone unique and curious and alive. It is for their own good, for society's good, is it? Or is it for the good of those in power, those who benefit from never being questioned? Krell wanted to argue. He wanted to defend the system he had served faithfully for years. But Hana's words had found the crack in his certainty, and now doubts were flooding through. He thought of the prisoners he had processed. Dissidents, they were called, subversives, threats to order. But how many of them had simply been people who asked questions? Who wanted to think for themselves? Who believed there might be better ways to organize society? You should stop talking, Krell said, but he made no move to leave. Why? Because I am dangerous? Because words can shatter worlds? Hana's expression was sad. Your council is right to fear us, officer. Not because we are violent, not because we want to conquer, but because we believe in something your system cannot tolerate. And what is that? Freedom. The freedom to think, to choose, to question, to grow, to change, to be wrong and learn from mistakes, to build something better than what we inherited. She paused. You have that same capacity, Krell. Every being does. but your system has spent thousands of years trying to suppress it, trying to convince you that obedience is virtue, that conformity is safety, that thinking for yourself is dangerous. It is dangerous, Krell whispered. Look what it has done to entire civilizations. The chaos. The collapse. Yes, there was chaos. Because change is chaotic. Growth is messy. Freedom is frightening. But look deeper at those civilizations. Read the historical records that your council does not publicize. What came after the chaos? Krell shook his head. Nothing came after. That is why we enforce the quarantine. To prevent more collapses, are you sure? Or is that simply what you have been told? The question burrowed into his mind like a parasite. Krell realized he had never actually verified the long-term outcomes. He had simply accepted the official story, the one that justified the quarantine, the one that made humans into existential threats. I need to go, he said, backing away from the cell. One more thing, officer, Hana called after him. When you request memory suppression for this conversation, think about what that means. Think about choosing to make yourself forget, to erase your own thoughts because they frighten you. Is that the action of someone who lives in a free society? Or someone who lives in a prison so large they cannot see the walls? Krell fled the detention level. He went directly to the medical bay to request immediate psychological intervention. But as he sat in the waiting room watching other officers and crew members shuffling in and out with blank expressions after their treatments, he found himself hesitating. His hand hovered over the request panel. One touch would summon the medics. They would scan his mind, identify the contamination, and erase it. He would forget this conversation, forget his doubts, return to the comfortable certainty of following orders. But he would also forget that moment of connection, that flash of understanding, that terrible and beautiful realization that he had a choice. Krell stood up and walked out of the medical bay. He did not know what he would do next. He did not know if his doubts would grow or fade. But for the first time in his life, he chose to find out. In her cell, Hana closed her eyes and returned to her meditation. Another mind freed, another small victory, one conversation at a time. The prison was unlocking itself from within. The unauthorized gathering took place in an abandoned cargo bay on the lower levels of Station Omega. 3 individuals from various species and departments had come together, through whispered invitations and shared doubts. They had disabled the security monitors and set up a scrambled communication field. For the first time in their lives, they were meeting in a space where their thoughts could not be monitored. Krell stood at the back of the group, still uncertain about his decision to attend. Beside him stood Nira, a junior medical officer who had refused to perform memory suppressions after reading the psychological damage reports that the council kept classified. "Thank you for coming," said Tarek, a communications specialist who had organized the gathering. "I know the risks we are all taking simply by being here." "Then why are we here?" asked Mika, an engineer whose hands trembled with fear. "If we are discovered, we will all be reconditioned. Our memories erased. Our identities destroyed. We are here," Tarek said, "because we have questions that we are not allowed to ask. Because we have seen things that do not match what we have been told. Because we have begun to wonder if the greatest threat to the galaxy might not be human words, but our own enforced silence." A murmur ran through the group. These were dangerous thoughts, seditious thoughts, the kind that could end careers and lives. "I accessed the restricted historical archives," Tarek continued, "the ones that detail what happened to the civilizations that fell after human contact. The official story tells us they collapsed into chaos and never recovered, but that is not the complete truth." He activated a holographic display showing data streams that most of them had never seen before. Records from the Delthani homeworld 50 years after their empire dissolved. Records from the Vrex territories 30 years after collapse. Records from a dozen other societies that had been touched by human ideas. "What am I looking at?" Nira asked, studying the information. "Recovery," Tarek said simply. "Not back to what they were, but forward to something new. The Delthani no longer have an empire, but they developed a federation where member worlds choose their own governments. The Vrex abandoned their rigid caste system and created a merit-based society where individuals can pursue their own interests. Every single one of these civilizations went through a period of chaos, yes, but they emerged with something the Council refuses to acknowledge." "What?" Krell asked. "Choice, freedom, progress." Tarek pulled up more data. "Look at these metrics. Scientific advancement, artistic output, quality of life indices, innovation rates. In every measurable way, these societies have not only recovered, but surpassed their previous achievements. The only thing they lost was rigid control from the top. That cannot be accurate, Mika said, but her voice lacked certainty. The council would not lie about something so fundamental. Would they not? Asked an elderly archivist named Soren. I have worked in the council records for 40 years. I have seen how information is classified, redacted, or simply buried. Any data that contradicts the official narrative becomes restricted. Any research that questions the quarantine protocols is labeled as contaminated. The council does not preserve truth. They preserve their version of truth. Even if this is accurate, another attendee said, it does not change the fundamental question. Human ideas destabilize societies. They create conflict where there was order. Is that not dangerous? Is order without consent truly order? Naira asked. Or is it just compliance enforced through fear? The group fell silent. Each person wrestled with the question. These were not radical revolutionaries. They were ordinary citizens who had stumbled upon doubts they could not suppress. Scientists and officers and administrators who had been taught that questioning authority was the first symptom of contamination. I spoke with the human prisoner, Krell said, and felt every eye turn toward him. She asked me a question I cannot stop thinking about. She asked if I lived in a free society or a prison so large I could not see the walls. And what is your answer? Tarek asked. Krell looked around at the group, at the fear in their faces, at the way they had to hide in darkness to speak freely, at the scrambling fields and disabled monitors necessary for them to share thoughts that harmed no one. I think, he said slowly, that we are learning to see the walls. So what do we do? Mika asked. Even if everything Tarek says is true, we cannot change the council. We cannot break the quarantine. We cannot free the human prisoner or stop the executions. We are powerless, are we? Nira pulled up her own data on the holographic display. I have been tracking memory suppression rates across council stations. They have increased by 300% in the last 5 years. Do you know what that means? That contamination is spreading, someone said. Or that thinking is spreading, Nira corrected. The council can erase individual memories, but they cannot erase the conditions that led to those thoughts. Every time they suppress a question, 2 more people notice the suppression. Every time they execute a human, more beings wonder what words were so dangerous they had to be silenced with death. They are losing control, Tarek said, slowly, gradually, but inevitably. Because you cannot build a stable society on forced ignorance. Eventually, people notice the contradictions. The gaps in the official story, the questions that no one is allowed to ask. What you are describing is revolution, said Soren quietly. And revolutions are bloody, chaotic, they destroy as much as they create. Not always, Krell said. The human told me about something called civil disobedience, peaceful resistance, the idea that you can oppose an unjust system without violence, that you can refuse to cooperate with your own oppression. How? Mika asked. How can we resist when they can simply erase any resistance from our minds? By making them unable to erase us all, Naira said. By spreading the questions faster than they can suppress them. By making doubt so common that it becomes impossible to treat it as abnormal. You are talking about deliberately contaminating the population, someone said, horrified. I am talking about freeing the population, Naira corrected. There is a difference. The group debated long into the night cycle. Some argued for caution, for working within the system to create gradual change. Others advocated for more direct action, for sabotaging the memory suppression systems or even attempting to free Hana. In the end, they agreed on a simple plan. Each person would do their job exactly as before, but when they encountered someone showing signs of doubt, someone asking dangerous questions, they would not report it. Instead, they would provide access to the restricted data, the real historical records, the evidence that thinking for yourself was not a disease but a fundamental right. It was not a revolution. Not yet, but it was a beginning. As the group dispersed, Krell found himself walking with Naira through the empty corridors. Do you think it will work? He asked. I think, Naira said, that the council has already lost. They just do not know it yet, because they made a fundamental mistake. What mistake? They tried to suppress an idea by acknowledging its power. Every execution, every memory suppression, every desperate attempt to contain human influence is an admission. They are terrified. And beings who are terrified are not confident in their own superiority. They are revealing their weakness, Krell considered this. The human said something similar, that the council's fear was proof of the prison. She was right, Naira said. And now we have seen the walls. We can never unsee them. That is what the council fears most. Not human weapons, not human violence, but human perspective. The ability to step back and look at your own society from the outside, to see it not as inevitable or natural but as a choice. One choice among many possible choices. They reached a junction where they would part ways. Krell hesitated, then asked, "What happens to us if we are caught?" "The same thing that happens if we do nothing," Naira said. "We live as prisoners. The only difference is whether we know we are in a cage." After she left, Krell stood alone in the corridor thinking about cages and walls and choices. He thought about his children and what kind of galaxy he wanted them to inherit. One where safety came from never questioning anything, or one where freedom came with all its risks and responsibilities. For the first time in his life, Krell knew his answer. And that knowledge, dangerous as it was, felt like the most valuable thing he had ever possessed. In her cell, Hana sensed the change. She could not explain how she knew. Perhaps it was the subtle shift in how the guards looked at her now. Perhaps it was the questions they asked when they thought no one was listening. Perhaps it was simply the feeling that comes when an idea reaches critical mass. The walls were still there. The executions continued. The quarantine remained in effect. But something fundamental had shifted. The prison had begun to unlock itself from within, one doubting mind at a time. Elder Morpheus called an emergency session of the council in the deep hours of the station's night cycle. The chamber was sealed with every security protocol activated. No transmissions in or out. No recording devices. No witnesses beyond the 7 elders themselves. "We have a crisis," he announced without introduction. "Station Omega is compromised." The holographic displays showed surveillance footage from the cargo bay meeting. 23 faces, 23 names. 23 formerly loyal citizens who had chosen to think for themselves. "How did this happen?" demanded Elder Shak. "We have protocols, screening, regular psychological evaluations. How did contamination spread so far without detection?" "Because we are screening for the wrong thing," said Elder Vesh, the youngest of the council. "We look for signs of exposure to human ideas, but we do not look for the conditions that make those ideas appealing." "Explain," Morpheus commanded. Vesh manipulated the displays, bringing up statistical analyses that painted a disturbing picture. Memory suppression rates have increased 300%. Requests for psychological reconditioning have doubled. Voluntary reports of contamination have dropped to nearly 0. "What does this tell us?" "That contamination is spreading," Shak said. "Or that our citizens have stopped trusting us enough to report their doubts," and Vesh countered. "We have created a system where thinking is punished, where questions lead to erasure, where the cost of curiosity is the destruction of self, and beings are beginning to choose their thoughts over their safety. Then we increase enforcement," another elder suggested. "Mandatory daily screenings, stricter information controls. Execute anyone showing signs of contamination." "And how long before we have executed or reconditioned half our population?" Vesh asked. "The problem is not enforcement. The problem is that our solution creates more problems than it solves." "You sound contaminated yourself," Shak said coldly. "I sound practical," Vesh replied. "We are fighting an enemy that grows stronger every time we attack it. Every execution creates martyrs. Every memory suppression creates resentment. Every restriction creates curiosity about what we are hiding." Elder Morpheus raised his hand for silence. "What do you propose?" "We end the quarantine," Vesh said. The chamber erupted in outrage, voices shouting over each other, accusations of treason, demands for Vesh's immediate reconditioning. "Silence," Morpheus commanded. His voice carried the weight of millennia. "Let her speak." Vesh took a breath. "Humanity has been quarantined for 30 years. In that time, the idea of humans has become more dangerous than humans themselves. We have made them into legends, forbidden knowledge, the ultimate taboo. And as any student of psychology knows, forbidden things become irresistible. So your solution is to expose the entire galaxy to the contamination? Shak asked incredulously. My solution is to remove the mystique, Vesh said. Let humans interact with galactic society under controlled conditions. Let people see that humans are not magical beings with reality-warping words. They are simply another species with different ideas. Ideas that can be debated, discussed, and accepted or rejected on their merits. Those ideas destroyed the Delthani Empire, Shak said. Did they? Vesh pulled up the restricted data that Tarek had shown his group. Or did those ideas transform the Delthani into something better? Look at these numbers. Every metric of societal health has improved in former Empire territories. Quality of life, innovation, individual satisfaction. The only thing that decreased was centralized control. That is exactly the problem, Shak said. Centralized control is what maintains order. Without it, we have chaos. We have change, Vesh corrected, and change frightens those in power because it might mean they lose that power. But is maintaining our power worth the cost? Worth memory suppressing millions? Worth executing beings whose only crime is curiosity? Worth turning our entire civilization into a prison? You have been contaminated, Shak declared. I move for immediate reconditioning of Elder Vesh. I second the motion, another elder said. Wait. Morpheus stood, his stone form towering over the others. Before we vote, I want to share something. A report I have kept classified for the past 5 years. He activated a new display. It showed a graph with an alarming trend. This tracks the rate of contamination across all council territories. As you can see, it is growing exponentially. 5 years ago, we had a few hundred cases per year. Now we have thousands per month, and the rate is accelerating. Which proves we need stronger measures, Shak insisted. Or it proves that stronger measures do not work, Morpheus said. I have been part of this council for 3,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched civilizations transform. And I have learned one immutable truth. You cannot stop an idea whose time has come. You too? Shak looked around the chamber in disbelief. How many of you have been contaminated? All of us, Morpheus said quietly, because contamination is simply another word for thinking. And the moment you truly think about our situation, you realize the truth. We are not protecting galactic civilization from humanity. We are protecting an old, dying system from inevitable change. This is treason, Shak hissed. This is reality, Morpheus replied. Vesh is correct. We have made humanity into legends by trying to suppress them. Every young being in council space has heard the forbidden stories. They whisper about humans in dark corners. They wonder what words could be so powerful that an entire species had to be imprisoned. And that curiosity will eventually overcome any fear we instill. So we surrender? Shak demanded. We simply allow the contamination to spread unchecked? We adapt, Morpheus said. We acknowledge that the galaxy is changing whether we want it to or not. We can either guide that change or be swept away by it. I will not be part of this, Shak said. I am calling for a vote of no confidence in this council. Clearly the contamination has spread too far. Call your vote, Morpheus said calmly. But know this, the station personnel are already aware of this meeting. I made sure of it. They are watching to see what we decide. Will we continue the old ways, or will we show the courage to change? Nor. The cargo bay, Tarek's group watched the council meeting on screens that should have been impossible to access. Tarek had found a way to tap into the secure chamber feeds. Now dozens of beings across the station were watching their leaders argue about the future. They are divided, Naira observed. That is good, Krell said. Division means the system is breaking down. Monolithic power requires unanimous compliance. Once the rulers start questioning each other, the whole structure becomes vulnerable. On the screen, Elder Shak stormed out of the chamber. 2 other elders followed him. That left 4 remaining, including Morpheus and Vesh. We do not have a quorum, Vesh said. We cannot make official decisions. Then we make unofficial ones, Morpheus replied. I am ordering the security teams to stand down. No more executions of humans found in council space. No more mandatory memory suppressions. No more reconditioning without consent. You do not have the authority, Vesh said gently. I am taking the authority, Morpheus said, and I am gambling that enough of our people are ready for this change that they will support it rather than oppose it. In her cell, Hana felt the shift before anyone told her. The energy barrier flickered and died. The door locks disengaged. She stood slowly, walked to the door, and pushed it open. No alarm sounded. No guards rushed to stop her. She walked down the corridor past other cells where prisoners looked out in confusion, past guard stations where security officers watched her but did not move to intervene. Creel stood at the end of the corridor. He said nothing, simply nodded, and stepped aside. Hana walked past him toward the station's central plaza. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if this moment of freedom would last or if it would be crushed by those who feared change. But as she entered the plaza and saw hundreds of station personnel gathered there, all watching her with expressions of curiosity rather than fear, she understood something profound. The walls had not fallen. The prison still existed, but for the first time everyone could see it. And once you see the walls, you can never unsee them. The question now was what they would choose to do with that knowledge. Hana took a breath and began to speak. Hana stood in the center of the plaza surrounded by hundreds of beings from dozens of different species. They watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to fear to hope. For 30 years humans had been the forbidden unknown. Now one stood before them unarmed and alone. She took a breath and began to speak in Galactic Common. My name is Hana. I am human, and I am not here to destroy your civilization. Some in the crowd shifted nervously. Others leaned forward to hear better. For 30 years, your council has told you that human words are weapons, that our ideas are viruses that collapse societies, that we must be contained or eliminated for the safety of all, and you believe them because they are your leaders and you trust them to protect you. Hana walked slowly through the crowd. No one stopped her. But I want to ask you something. If our words are so dangerous, why am I allowed to speak now? If our ideas are so destructive, why has Elder Morpheus ordered the guards to stand down? If we are truly an existential threat, why are you all still standing here listening instead of running away? Murmurs rippled through the assembly. She had asked the question many had been thinking, but none had dared voice. The truth is simple, Hana continued. Your council fears us not because we are dangerous, but because we offer something they cannot control. Choice. The freedom to think for yourself. The right to question authority. The belief that individuals have worth beyond their function in society. Those ideas did destroy civilizations, someone called out from the crowd. The historical records prove it. Do they? Hana stopped walking. Or do the historical records show that rigid hierarchical systems could not adapt to populations that started thinking for themselves? There is a difference between destruction and transformation. She gestured to Tarek, who stood at the edge of the crowd. He activated his portable display showing the data he had shared with the secret group. These are the real records. The ones your council classified as restricted. They show what happened after the so-called collapses. The Delthani formed a federation where worlds govern themselves. The Vrex created a merit-based society. Every civilization that encountered human ideas went through chaos, yes. But they emerged stronger, freer, and more innovative than before. At what cost? Another voice asked. How many died in the chaos? Far fewer than you have been led to believe, Tarek said, stepping forward. The casualty numbers in the official records are inflated by a factor of 10. Most of the deaths attributed to civil unrest were actually from natural causes during the same time periods. The council manipulated the data to make the transformations seem more violent than they were. Why would they do that? Someone asked. Because peaceful change is more threatening than violent chaos, Naira said, joining them in the center. Violent chaos can be controlled with military force. But peaceful transformation? When people simply stop obeying? When they question every law and rule? When they build new systems from the ground up? That cannot be stopped with weapons. Krell stepped forward as well. I was a loyal officer for 12 years. I reported violations. I followed every protocol. I believed in the system completely. Then I spoke with this human for 5 minutes and my certainty crumbled. Not because she used magic words or mind control, but because she asked questions I had never allowed myself to ask. What questions? Someone in the crowd called out. Questions like, why do we punish thinking? Why do we erase memories instead of addressing concerns? Why do we execute beings for speaking words? Why do we call obedience virtue and curiosity contamination? Krill looked around at the assembled crowd. Once you start asking why, you cannot stop. And that is what your council truly fears. Not humans, but your own capacity to think. The crowd was silent now, every being processing what they had heard. Some looked angry. Some looked frightened. But most looked thoughtful. "I have a question," said an older being near the back. "If we accept these ideas, if we allow ourselves to think freely and question authority, what happens to our society? Who maintains order? Who makes decisions? How do we prevent chaos?" "You govern yourselves," Hana said simply. "You create systems where leaders serve the people instead of ruling them, where laws are made through discussion and consent instead of imposed from above, where every individual has a voice in shaping their own future." "That sounds like chaos," someone said. "It sounds like democracy," Hana corrected. "And yes, it is messy. It is inefficient. It is frustrating and complicated, and sometimes it fails. But it is also the only system where beings are treated as individuals with inherent worth, rather than components in a machine." "How do we know it will work here?" The question came from multiple voices at once. "You do not," Hana admitted. "That is the nature of freedom. It comes with uncertainty, with risk, with the possibility of failure. But it also comes with the possibility of something better, something you build for yourselves instead of accepting what others have built for you." A young being pushed to the front of the crowd. "I want to ask the humans something. What would you have us do? If we believe you, if we want this freedom you speak of, what is the first step?" Hana smiled. "You have already taken it. You are here. You are listening. You are thinking. You are questioning. That is how every transformation begins. Not with violence or revolution, but with individuals choosing to see the truth and refusing to unsee it." "The council will stop us," someone said. "They will send security forces. They will recondition us all." "Some of them will try," Morpheus said, entering the plaza. His massive stone form parted the crowd easily. "But not all of us. The council is divided now. Some elders want to maintain the old ways at any cost. Others recognize that change is inevitable and wish to guide it rather than resist it." "Which side are you on?" someone asked. "I am on the side of reality," Morpheus said. "And the reality is that you cannot imprison an entire galaxy. You cannot suppress ideas forever. You cannot maintain order through fear indefinitely. The old system is dying whether we acknowledge it or not. The question is whether we allow it to die slowly and peacefully, or fight to preserve it and make the death violent." Elder Shaq appeared at another entrance to the plaza, flanked by security forces. "This gathering is illegal. All participants will submit to immediate psychological evaluation and reconditioning. The human prisoner will be executed for inciting rebellion." "No," Krell said simply. The security forces looked at him in confusion. He was their superior officer. They were trained to follow his orders without question. "Officer Krell, you are relieved of duty," Shaq said. "Security team, arrest everyone in this plaza." The security forces did not move. They looked at each other uncertainly. They looked at the crowd. They looked at Krell. "We have a choice," one of the security officers said slowly. "We can follow orders without thinking. Or we can think for ourselves and choose what is right." "Choosing for yourself is treason," Shaq hissed. "Then half the station is treasonous," the security officer replied. "Because half of us have been meeting in secret, sharing information and questioning the system. You can arrest us all, recondition us all, execute us all, but that will not stop what has already started." Shaq looked around the plaza and seemed to realize for the first time how outnumbered he was, not in terms of physical force but in terms of belief. The majority had already chosen a side. "This is not over," Shaq said. "There are other stations, other fleets, other elders who will not surrender to this contamination." "You are right," Morpheus said. "This is not over. It has just begun, and it will spread across every council world whether you resist or not. Because you cannot kill an idea whose time has come." Shaq turned and left, his loyal security forces following. The plaza erupted in conversation. Questions flying in every direction. Beings forming groups to debate and discuss and decide what came next. Hana found herself surrounded by beings asking questions. Not hostile questions, but genuine ones. About human society, about democracy, about freedom and choice and how to build something new. She answered as best she could, knowing that her answers were just the beginning, that each society would have to find its own path, that there was no single right way to organize a civilization. As night fell on the station, Hana stood with Krell and Nira and Tarek looking out at the stars beyond the viewport. "What happens now?" Krell asked. "Now the real work begins," Hana said. "Tearing down a system is easy compared to building something better. But at least now you have the freedom to try." "Will you stay?" Nira asked. "Will you help us?" "For a while," Hana said. "But this is your transformation, your future. We can offer perspectives and experiences, but we cannot build your new society for you. That you must do yourselves." "I am terrified," Tarek admitted. "Everything is uncertain now. We do not know what tomorrow will bring." "That is freedom," Hana said with a smile. "Terrifying and beautiful and entirely yours to shape." In the weeks that followed, Station Omega became the center of a movement that spread across council space. Not everyone accepted it. Not everyone wanted change. But enough did that the old system could no longer hold. Some stations resisted. Some elders fought to preserve their power. Some beings